Everyone, we'll give it a couple more moments to see who else shows up. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to September's PatternFly community meeting. We have a handful of updates from various groups and teams working on PatternFly and working with PatternFly. We have I guess I could share the agenda slide. We have a handful of, like I said, a handful of teams. We'll have content, design, accessibility for React and PatternFly.org. So we will start this week with content and Abby.
Thanks, Nicole. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Alrighty, so I have a few super quick content updates that I'm really excited to share with everybody. So let's dive right in. Here's what's been going on in the world of PatternFly content over this last month. We recently published a design guidelines contribution page. We're regularly working on updating and evolving the UX writing style guide. And we also have a PatternFly newsletter that's coming out in just a few days. Starting off with the contribution page, you can find this new page right on the patternfly.org site in the main nav under Contribute Design Guidelines. As the name implies, this page is a set of instructions for contributing design guidelines to the patternfly.org site. And this page exists because we realized that we had a lot of internal documentation on how to contribute design guidelines, and it wasn't always easy to find. It wasn't very connected. So what we decided to do was combine all of our internal documentation, clean it up, and then open source it and put it on the PatternFly website. There is a lot of ground covered on this page. It walks through everything from setting up your GitHub environment all the way to publishing your PR. So definitely check it out. It has a table of contents as well, so it's very easy to just kind of hop around and go to the sections that are most relevant to you. We also have a writing page coming up that will walk through writing tips and best practices for design guidelines, so stay tuned for that. And then speaking of writing, our UX writing style guide is now in the main navigation on the PatternFly website under UX writing. It kicks off on the About page. That is a really big win for findability. And another win is all the collaboration that's been happening for the UX writing style guide. We have people working together from UX writing, design, research, technical writing, and more. Everybody is really just joining forces to make this style guide the very best it can be. One of our main focuses right now is internationalization. We're working on expanding the numerics page and also creating some pages for symbols and units to make sure that we're giving guidance that will help our flyers create content for global users. We definitely have a long way to go, but we're on the right path, and we really appreciate all of the folks who have a lot of domain experience in this area helping us build out the guide. And another update is the error messages page. You'll notice that that page has been revamped a bit. We have new examples, new patterns, and just some more guidance to help you write useful error messages. And then finally, we have the PatternFly newsletter. So historically, I had been sending out emails on a monthly cadence about content to the PatternFly mailing list. And I recently stopped sending those emails just a few months ago because we're now rolling out a PatternFly newsletter that will cover quarterly highlights. So anything noteworthy that's happened in the last few months. This newsletter is a really good example of quality over quantity. So you'll receive fewer emails, but you'll get more information in those newsletters, and the information will cover a wider range of disciplines, not just content, but also accessibility, design, development, interesting meetings that we've had, and anything else that's worthy of sharing with the community. The newsletter is scheduled to go out later this week, so keep an eye out. And also send any feedback to me. Here's my email address. If you see something in the newsletter that you really like, let me know. Or if there's some areas that could be improved, let me know. That will help us create an even better newsletter for next quarter. So I'm going to end it there. That's all I had to share. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing any feedback that you have.
Awesome, thanks. I will send out a PDF of all the slides to the whole attendee list. So if you didn't catch the email address or have any extra feedback, you can grab that after the meeting. Next, we have design. A few different members of the design team are going to present some updates. I think starting with Matt.
Thanks, Nicole. I'll go ahead and share my screen out. Let's see. Okay, is everybody seeing that slide? Okay, so I'm just going to run through fairly quickly some of the things that we're currently working on. Design sprint. All of these, there are links in the slides to each of these, the issue that accompanies these that we're working on in the design repo. So certainly feel free to, if you're interested, to dig deeper into the design and comment or give us feedback. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is dual list selector. Margot and Menestro has been working on this design. This is sometimes also called a shuttle selector or a list builder in other libraries, but it's basically this type of thing where you can shuttle items between two lists. So you have a list of available options and a list of selected options. So we're pretty close to finalizing this and handing this off to the development. Scroll spy navigation. Lucia Bailing has been working on this with and picking up on some earlier work done on the from the website team. This will be the basic idea of a scroll spy navigation is that as opposed to jumping to a new page upon navigating, it stays within the page, but basically is navigating. Usually these are anchor links or heading levels within the page. So clicking on log, for example, would scroll this page down to the section labeled log, and as the user scrolls, the navigation will also be synchronized with the position in the page. Horizontal card. Gina Doyle's been working on this as a new card offering, and this post allows us to have card content that is displayed in columns like this across a page, and also introduces the ability to collapse and expand a card. Expand collapse all. This will be a new feature for tables and lists where you can, by clicking this expand all widget that we're adding to the toolbar, basically expand everything in the expandable list or table, and likewise collapse everything in the list or table. And form sections allowing for hierarchical grouping or sections within forms. And then finally, a couple other things that were just kind of ongoing work in progress that you may want to check out. Dark theme work, which Michael Saldonia and Marie Dorskova are currently working on, and then tab usage guidelines that Gina Doyle is currently preparing. So that's it. You can visit the PatternFly design workspace for a more complete look at what we're currently working on within our design sprint. And that's it. Any questions? Okay, if not, I'm going to hand it off to Marie to talk about the sketch library updates.
I'm going to share. Marie, do you want to share actually that slide?
Do you want to share it? I can share it.
Doesn't matter. I'll share it for now.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. All right. So one of the things I just wanted to go through real quick was that, well, two things. One, that Marie's going to be taking over the design kit now. So if anyone has any questions or anything like that, definitely go to her. And she's aware of like a bunch of the stuff that's in progress right now for making the design kit more accessible. So any questions about that, I would definitely reach out to her about. But that is one thing that I wanted to go over today, which is one of the last things that I worked on, was converting the symbol library into like files of SVGs so that designers can pull those into any design tool that they want. And I just quickly, if you click on that URL, you would get to the same folder, but they're all in the GitHub repo for the design kit repo. And another cool thing is that they keep the symbol names, so they're all formatted in the way that you would see it in the sketch library as well. So this, for example, is the accordion. I'm not going to click on that and download it, but that is showing the exact same thing that's shown right here. So now you should be able to take those in locally and drag them into your design tool and get the same type of symbols. And one other thing to note is that the padding on the symbol will be shown, so it will look like this. The reason why we did that is just to give you more of guidance of how the symbol will expand or react if you change some of the content that's within it. So I'm going to go back to present and I will hand it off to you, Marie.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gina, for your introduction. And yeah, hi everyone. I would like to introduce some new additions in a design kit that we've made together. And the first thing is that we've added small and large sizes for all icons so that it's easy to get them in a different sizes. The next is the label group. It allows you to share labels in one group. It's responsive, so you can make the group dismissible or non-dismissible, and it's possible to expand or decrease the number of labels in a group. The next thing that we've added for symbol library is the toggle button group. You should be able to toggle between two views, or you can go into the, for example, topology view, which was the main purpose of this component. The last week, I've been working on centered tabs with icons, and Gina and I didn't know it would be such a huge problem because it's almost impossible to have the icon and text centered aligned together in Sketch. We tried some crazy tutorials for it, but I can say that it was successfully solved and it's available in our symbol library. And when it comes to template additions, we've added examples for inline alerts in forms, and the last thing is a modal that can be placed at the top of the screen. And the last but not least, we are going to work on minimizing the amount of nested symbols to make them more available when you switch between them, because now they are sometimes too deep when you want to change them in a sketch. And that's pretty much it from the design kit. And thank you. If you have any questions about it, just let me know.
Awesome, thank you. All right, next we have a handful of updates from accessibility. Super exciting. So Jessie and Joachim, I think, are taking over first.
Yep, let me go ahead and share my screen. So I'm going to kind of share some of the background of what we've worked on, why we've worked on it, some of the things we've done, and then I'm going to pass it off to Joachim, who will show the latest of it. But basically, in the last couple of months, we've been using this Axe script. So it uses Axe Core, and it's really cool because instead of just using the Chrome Axe browser extension on every single page, you can run the script across all of your pages at one time, which can give you a really nice report. So back, I think this is April, we had a report that looks something like this. So we had all of our stats. It would compare the things that had passed versus things that had failed, and then would give you the URL and the data. Often what I would do is I would test this on products and then go, okay, here's my data, what actually is going on. But some of the results that I was getting were a little bit odd, and when I would try to compare with the Axe browser extension, they were different. So for example, some of these results I would get, like on dashboard, would just say null. And comparing it to the Axe browser extension, that obviously wasn't what it was giving me. And so the information was odd to say the least. We wanted to kind of debug what was going on and see what updates we needed to make. So basically, once we started kind of digging into it, we started adding delays, putting in the slow-mo version of Puppeteer, taking off headless mode, really digging in to see each step as it went. We started realizing that these pages weren't fully loading. So dashboards was a page that takes longer than some of the other pages. And so we needed to actually wait for something specific. So we started adding selectors to our Axe script so that when you're testing your accessibility, we can actually wait for specific things on the page. So some things we looked at for OpenShift, for example, are making sure there's no loading spinner, that there's no skeleton text, that there's content actually in it. And so we actually wanted to make sure we waited for every single page. So we added these screenshots to make sure of that. And then after that, we started realizing, well, for certain products, you might want to actually be able to log into your site. So for OpenShift or cost management or any of those types of things, you might want to actually have something in your config to log in. So we'd create a username, password, and then actually have it wait for specific things on the page and then log yourself in. We also started noticing once we did this that there were some differences in the actual data that was reported. So some results might only give us the related node, some would give us the full thing, some would say the data was null, and we wanted to make sure that we're getting all of the information, that nothing's getting cut out. So when we were digging into it, we started noticing that the JSON and the XML or HTML were a little bit different. And it looked like it was the way we were manipulating the data. So we updated that in the reporter so that now, once our next version came out, we were like, okay, now we have everything. We know where the ID is, the data, the related node, impact message, everything's there. That was consistently across the case. We also occasionally started noticing that some of the warnings were slipping in there. So we made sure that we're using the exact same Axe Core version and that we can specify all the WCAG rules on each of these things. But once we had something like this, where we have the screenshot, we have the page, we're still keeping the stats, and we have all of our information, we started realizing that we could still improve it. It has the information, but the goal that I've always had with this Axe script is to be able to hand this off to products and for them to be empowered to help their users and to make their things more accessible. And sometimes this data isn't always the clearest or the easiest to use. So Joachim has been a massive, massive help in all of these steps, and he had this idea of taking this report and then making it with PatternFly components and he did some really awesome work with it. So I want to make sure I pass it off to him so he can show some of the cool things that he's done with it, and then also the features that are now available to all of you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so he can jump in.
Yep, thanks, Jessie. Let's see. Click here to start sharing the screen. Okay. All right, can you see? All right, so I added a little bit of information to our slide deck, but here's a link to the PatternFly accessibility repository. And just a little bit of info, Zach created this a while back. So Jessie and I have really been building on top of this and just adding more configuration options. And very recently, a new report that should provide more information on the accessibility issues that you've encountered. And it's hot off the press, so if you find any bugs, please create some issues in that repository and we can quickly fix them. I've uploaded a little demo of what you could expect the output to look like, but I'll run through that in a second. And then one way you can consume this, you can either add this directly to your project, if you wanted to run this as part of your continuous integration steps, or if you just wanted to run this globally and run it yourself against a set of pages, you can also do that. Here's an example using Yarn, where you just globally add the accessibility CLI tool, and it has a couple peer dependencies on React and React DOM, so we can add those as well. And then you can just simply run the CLI tool against any URLs that you want to test. And the report is created under the coverage directory in the same directory that you ran the CLI command from. And the new report is under this dist directory, so you could open up that index.html file directly. So quick demo. Let me just copy. Okay, so in this example, I'm running the PatternFly accessibility CLI tool against 3 websites. First of all, the PatternFly.com alert page. Secondly, the Google.com accessibility page. And then third, just Google.com. So if I run that, you can see these are the 3 URLs it will test against. While the tool is running, it gives you immediate feedback as to what violations it encountered. And lastly, it will create a new Webpack powered PatternFly report, which takes about 20 to 30 seconds. So if we just patiently wait for that, it's already done. And the new report is under this directory, so I can just open that directly in the browser, which I'll do right here. Let me just reload that. So you can see I can just open up that index.html file directly. Here's what the report looks like. I'm just walking through here a little bit. You can see we've tested 3 URLs. None of them passed, 3 of them failed. And we've encountered 5 accessibility issues. There's the graph to kind of show you that overview. And on the upper left side, you can see which context X ran against. In this case, it evaluated the entire document for all 3 URLs, and that is configurable. So if you only wanted to run X on a subsection of the web page and not against the whole page, you could configure that. And also, these are the options that X was run with, which are also configurable. For example, if you wanted to ignore other rules, you could easily add more rules to be ignored in this listing. So going down here, we can see our 3 URLs. Here, for example, here's the accessibility row. We can click on the screenshots if you wanted to see what X was seeing, just to kind of get context there. And then if we open up that panel, here is the list of violations. So there was only one violation here, but there were 2 of them. So you can see it says 2 accessibility issues. So there are actually 2 violations, but they're the same type of violation, which is why they're grouped together here. And if you've used the X Chrome extension before, then this layout should look very familiar. So I've tried to make it easy to kind of switch between the 2 if you wanted to actually go and debug that issue. And if we wanted to look at one of these issues, for example, here it tells me the element location that created the accessibility issue. It's an SVG, and it tells me that to solve this violation, I need to do at least one of these things. So it gives me some concrete action steps that I can take. And if I were to go to that page, google.com/accessibility, I could just take this selector, look for it, which I've done right here, document not query selector for this guy. And we can see it's actually this image on the bottom left side, which is in the footer. So this Google SVG image doesn't have an ARIA label. So I guess a quick fix would be to add an ARIA label to make this more accessible. So let me close that again. Okay. And if we look at the PatternFly accessibility issue, if I open that up, again, here's the screenshot where it includes our new beautiful table of contents that was created recently. But actually that table of contents is actually producing this accessibility violation. In order to get around it, because like, for example, if you wanted to test against our PatternFly components, you're really not interested in testing maybe the entire document, you just want to test the components. You could do that by adding the context. And if I now rerun the command, let me just clear that. If I rerun the command, only against PatternFly in this case, I can pass it an additional context, which is some kind of selector query. In this case, I know that I'm only interested in the main content and not the table of contents navigation, which was creating this accessibility issue. I can run it with that context in mind. Let me just rerun that. Give it another 15 seconds or so. Okay, and now if I reload, this time I've only ran it against PatternFlyorg. Now you can see that there are no more accessibility issues. There's a little bug here already where it doesn't tell you what the X context was run with, but that'll be fixed very soon. But basically it was run against just the main portion of the document and not the whole document. And lastly, if you wanted to provide even more options, if you go to the GitHub repository, it tells you all the CLI options, but if you wanted to provide more options such as, custom weights, for example, you know that once you load a page, you need to load for weighting spinners, etc. The easiest way to do that is to actually create a custom config. So if you run the PatternFly accessibility tool and pass it the config argument with location to a configuration file, you can specify a whole bunch of options. The authentication function, a wait for function that it tries to wait for each of the pages, and all the other CLI options you can specify here as well. And your URLs can either be an array of strings or an array of objects. And if it's an object, again, you specify the main URL, and then once you navigate to that, you can specify that it should wait for something. Hopefully that makes it clear. Yeah, that's all I have. If there's any questions, feel free to ask me anything.
Joachim, this is Amy. Hi. This is really cool. Okay to share with our development teams?
Yeah, sure. Just keep in mind that there may still be bugs, so definitely I'm happy to keep working on it and fixing bugs as you find them.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
No problem.
Awesome, thanks so much. That's very exciting stuff. I'm a huge fan of accessibility. I think our whole team is, but I'm learning more to appreciate it every day. I have been working for a while on with Tatani and Jessie on a new accessible variant of the select component. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. In React, we just recently released a new variant, favorites. So if you click into the select, you'll see that there are stars. So you can favorite different options in your select menu. And if you do, they stay at the top and a new section is added at the top called favorites. So that helps if you have really long lists and you want to be able to navigate to your most frequently used options faster. This variant did pose some interesting accessibility challenges, especially when it came to keyboard interactions because this component is relatively complex, and a lot of the keys that we would want to use to navigate these favorites are already being used. So the favorites variant has a little bit of its own keyboard interaction compared to the other selects. So if I, let's see the best way to show this. So I'm going to just be navigating using my keyboard, and when I start typing, so there's a few ways that you can open the select. If you start typing, it will automatically open the select. That's handy. If I tab into it, it does not open it right away. So I can either hit enter or I can start typing. I can use the up and down arrow keys to navigate through the options to choose one. So if I navigate up and down and then I hit enter, it will choose one. So that's relatively standard. The problem becomes when I want to favorite an option using just the keyboard. So what I had to do, or what we all had to do, is put our heads together and figure out how we would allow the user to do that, because in most of our other select variants, they don't have a second action on a single select option item. So what we did is we were tempted to try to make the left and right arrow keys navigate across a select option. However, since this is a variant that's ideally used for very, very big lists of options, they often are type ahead variants. So they often have a typable input at the top of the select. So by default, you're typing. And so the cursor and the focus is remaining on the input. And so the left and right arrow keys actually already have a function. They're helping you navigate left and right within the input. So I couldn't use the left and right arrow keys to shift focus across the option in the menu. So what we did, the solution for now, or the solution that we've come up with that's finally working, is if you hit tab while the menu is open, it shifts the browser focus into the menu so that you can use the left and right arrow keys to navigate the menu, the up and down and left and right. And then all I have to do is hit enter to favorite an option. And if you hit tab again, the focus will shift, the browser focus will shift back up to the input, so I can continue typing if I'd like. And I can still use the up and down arrow keys to navigate through the options. But it's a little bit of a unique design and took a lot of brainstorming to figure out the best solution. And for now, this is what we've got. And it's pretty fun to play with. So feel free to play with it and let us know how you feel like it's working. That's all I've got for select favorites. All right. Next, Jessie has a few more accessibility updates she'd love to let us know
I'll try to
about.
be quick. I know I've been stealing a lot of time, but I will say Nicole did an awesome job on that select. That was a tough one, so I want to make sure I give her a little shout out there. But I'm going to go through some other small updates, well, smaller compared to the script. One of the things that we updated was our card. There was a really great suggestion given to me about our card title and that we should be able to customize it. So by default, our card title is a div. And the reason why that is mostly so you have the flexibility to put whatever you want in it. However, for a lot of screen readers, they use headings to create menus so you can kind of navigate very quickly through the page with all the different headings. So you might want your card title to actually be in that menu so that they can easily get to the card. So now we can just add the component prop, put in whatever you want. So now it's an H4. And now this header will also appear in my headings menu for screen readers with both VoiceOver and VBA, etc. That's one little update we made. And then also tabs. What we noticed is that we were getting this X error for one of our examples with the mounting on click. And the reason this was happening is that all of these ARIA controls attributes were existing prior to the ID actually existing on the page yet, which was causing an error because it's pointing to something that doesn't exist. So we now have it conditionally rendering the ARIA controls based on once it actually finally is there. And we wanted to make sure we added this one because it could actually affect product's axe accessibility. So if you wanted to run the axe test on your product, if you were using this specific example, you would have an error. So now that will not happen. And then some smaller things that we updated is just some examples. The tertiary and horizontal nav weren't keyboard accessible, and all we really needed was an href. So just making sure that we have our examples as accessible as possible, because I want to make sure that when you're looking at our examples, you know how to make your example accessible as well. So that's one little thing, and then another labeling issue where there was just an example that needed a label. And this doesn't seem like a big deal, but I've noticed this is like the most common issue I see in product. So make sure you don't forget your labels for things like inputs and checkboxes. And anyway, I want to go through this really quickly, but I'll go ahead and pass it off because I think I've been talking for a while.
Well, that's okay. Accessibility is important. But we will move on. Michael Coker has some updates from PatternFly Core. So whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Here's some, let's see if I click the right button. No, that's the wrong button. Okay, great. So just some changes since the last meeting. The core repository, first off, we've got a new developer workspace. So for any developers working with the server that spins up in the repo, just a heads up that the build steps are the same, but we've got the new theme that you see on the website. It's a lot faster, works a lot better in a lot of regards. Probably the most notable difference is it runs on a different port now, so you'll notice it on an 8001. And included a link here just to the README, and there's development section for it with the build steps and all of that outlined. And then next, some components that we've completed in core that you don't quite see in React yet, so just a sneak preview of what's to come. First off, we've got a code editor component. This is being built around a specific code editor plugin that we'll use with the React repository, but you can also just use this as a plain text code box where you can just include text without any sort of actual editor plugin. And then up next, we've implemented the base set of features to enable draggable rows in the data list. So you can see an example of this at the link included here, and just a few examples of the states that you'll see once this is implemented in the React component. And then continuing on with the data list, we've added some text modifiers that you can apply to the data list to better control the way text behaves, wraps, whitespace, that sort of thing. These will be familiar if you use the table component, and it's basically just the ability to truncate content in a cell, to apply aggressive word wrapping for long strings. So say you've got a super long URL or something like that. And then the ability to apply a no wrap modifier that keeps text on a single line, keeps it from breaking. And then a list of the elements that it applies to at the bottom. You can apply it to the whole list, a row, a cell, and then we've implemented just a special container that you can use for a line of text inside of a cell or something like that, that you can apply that modifier to. Up next is the progress component. We noticed with longer strings as either the title or the status area of the progress component, the word wrapping didn't behave ideally. And so we just worked on that a little bit to clean it up. And so you can see a few examples here of just what happens with long strings inside of the progress component. That should look a lot better. And then the top example is a new feature for truncation. So you can now truncate the title text in a progress component with ellipsis with overflow content. And then some more stuff with the progress is we implemented a new state. So it's a warning state with pretty warning colors. And then this one's pretty great. So the button component, we now have a progress or loading variation. And basically what it does is it, to keep the button from shifting in size when the loading animation starts, we size the button a little bit bigger than a regular button so that there's room for the animation to appear once the button is in the loading state without shifting the size of the button. And so there's a couple of examples here. So you see a little bit of extra padding on the button on the left, and then the button maintains its size, and the spinner component is added to the button, and there's a slight, subtle animation for the text when it slides over and displays the spinner. And we made an update to the chip group component, just regards to the close button for removable chip groups. The close button used to wrap basically like chips would. It would wrap to a new line on its own, and we wanted to keep that from happening. So now the close button for these chip groups is always positioned to the top right. The modal component got a new variation. That's for top aligned. So the modal by default is center aligned horizontally and vertically. Now it's aligned to the top with an opt-in variation, and there's a CSS variable that you can configure to specify a custom amount of space from the top of the window if you wanted to move that around a little bit. And with the form control component, specifically with text inputs, we added the ability to be able to specify your own icon used in the text input, and you see that in the last example. And so you can just pass a background URL to the text input, and it'll display a custom icon there. And the notable thing about that is it works with all the different states. So success, error, warning, that sort of thing. Everything shows up properly and will work with whatever kind of icon that you want to add there. And then on top of that feature, we added 2 new icons using the same basic logic that a custom icon is added to. And those icons are a calendar and a clock. So you'll see those, and that's also to support an upcoming component that we're actively working on for date and time picker. And then that's it. Any questions?
A lot of fans of the pizza icon. Nice choice. I hope some product adopts that. I don't know who would. Okay. Next, we have some updates from React. I think Tatani's going to go first.
Okay. So the label group component was added. Evan made this contribution. So here's some examples of the label group. This is a basic label group with just 3 labels. And then if there are more than 3 labels, then the component will automatically create an overflow chip. So in this label group, there are 3 more labels. And that number is configurable. So if you want more or less labels to show by default, you set the pop num labels. And then you can also add a category name to the label group, as shown over here. And the label group can also be removable. So you set the pop is closable and provide a on-click function. So over here you can remove the label group. And then you can also have a vertical label group. So the label will appear one on top of the other, as shown here. And I think with the core fix, the close button issue will be resolved. And that's it for the label group.
And let's see, Katie has a few React updates too.
Yep, let me just share my screen. There we go. All right, so first up in the toolbar component, we have a new property to adjust the toolbar's whole inset. So you can see between this first top example and this inset example, You have a little bit of extra padding that can be adjusted at different breakpoints, just to give you a bit more wider control over how your toolbar is going to look on a page. This is similar to some of our other inset properties. So in the JavaScript, it's just going to be a collection of different types of insets at different breakpoints. And then next up, in the drawer component, we have a new variant for expanding a drawer from the bottom. The typical drawer will be on a left or right, but now we can also do bottom, so it'll expand up from the bottom. And pretty simple and straightforward for that one. Thirdly, we have a new component, the skeleton component, and to act as placeholders while like pages data's loading. Got this nice little gray animation and just kind of holds the space in this padding. It is default, just expands to the container, but you can also customize the width, and this example just shows a bunch of different percentages. You may also customize the height, so you can make it taller. And you can also customize it to account for different types of font sizes. So if like you have a placeholder for a heading, which is larger, versus some description text, which is smaller, so you have a bunch of different options there, and the corresponding font size that it is replacing. And lastly, you also have a bunch of different shapes. So you can do circles, which are customized with height and width as well, and then squares with different heights, and rectangles with different heights. I think that's it for me. Any questions? All right, guess that's it.
Awesome. Let's see. A few other React updates. We have one from Joachim.
Yep. Okay, so for the table component, we've now added abilities to add tooltips or popovers to your heading items. If you look at the very first basic example, you can see that it now includes this question mark icon next to repositories, and this is a tooltip. So if you hover over, it automatically shows you the information. And the other variant is popover next to pull requests. If you have to click on it to open up the popover, and these are the both variations and encode. It's pretty simple to add in your columns definition. All you have to add is this header object with inside of it has an info child object, and it can either take on tooltip and tooltip props if you wanted to have different properties forwarded to the tooltip component, or popover and the corresponding popover props, which are forwarded to the popover component. And if you want to know exactly what kind of props you can pass here or here, you can just go to the relevant tooltip or popover component and look at the props there. So just one really quick example. Let's say I have this popover, and the default behavior is that it flips automatically when it encounters a border. And you can also see that the Z index is a bit higher than the header. And also when I click outside the popover, it automatically closes. Now let's say my requirements are that it shouldn't auto close on clicking outside. The Z index should be placed such that it's under the header, and it should not auto flip. So it's very easy to forward those props to the popover component. If I go back down here to my popover configuration, and inside popover props, I can just add 3 more properties. I pass hide on outside click false. I disable enabling flip, and I set the Z index to 299, which is 1 less than the header. And now if I look at my popover again, if I click outside, nothing happens. I can still close it using the button or hitting the escape button. And also if I scroll up, you can see it's now under the header and it won't auto flip. So it's very easy to forward props that way. And that's all I have.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Those kinds of additions to the table component can be a lot harder than they look. So that's awesome. Awesome work. And Joe, you have an update to notification drawer?
I do. Can you see my screen? Cool. So it's real quick. So the notification drawer as it was, did not have a button to close it. So this is a new button to close the drawer. We use the notification drawer on OpenShift, and one of the comments was that there's just the toggle to open and close the drawer. So we're adding this so that it's a little bit more obvious how to close the drawer. So there's a little demo here, which shows the close in action. So you could either toggle it closed using the notification badge or the button. In order to get that drawer, that close button to appear, you just pass in a close callback function. And we do the rest. And that's it for me.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
And the last update today is from Zach about patternfly.org, but it's exciting, so everybody get excited and really awake for the last 10 minutes of the demo.
Wake up. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. So yeah, PatternFly.org's had a lot of work going on for the past month, so I'll share some of what I've done. So if you were here 11 months ago, I gave this presentation about the first PatternFly.org refactor, and what it did was it unified our docs format and it standardized the way that we published them and made everything consistent across our 3 workspaces. And then we got a few bonus features in there too, like we can now have full screen previews for each and every example and code sandbox links, and our headers wouldn't look all janky. And that's where we start off for refactor number 2, which had a whole bunch of things in the design. So not all of them made it, but these are the ones that made it. Example captions is one. So before, this was difficult to support because it requires like modifying the abstract syntax tree of the markdown. So table of contents got moved like from the top to the right, and now it's like a scroll spy type deal, which we don't have a component for in Patternfly. And then there's a view source on GitHub that got added thanks to Sam Linville, who's no longer with us. RIP Sam, but yep, that was his idea. And probably the biggest change, which we've gotten tons of feedback that people love, is the combine HTML and React docs. So we separate them with these tabs and we have one unified side nav. And that by far is like the biggest change and requires a lot of refactoring on its own, because we had always split up the site before into 2 separate worlds of React and Core, and you could use that version toggle in the side nav to go between them. But we did away with that. So our current system held us back in a lot of ways. The biggest one is for the example captions. It wasn't really feasible without a whole bunch of workarounds and tinkering with Gatsby internals, because the abstract syntax tree is read-only. And so while we can pull example captions from that, we can't exactly add example captions to that. So it was also slow, like 20 to 30 seconds per change in React, and it crashed, and it was the longest part of our CI pipeline, and it was doing some silly things like downloading all handlebars templates on each page load. I don't know why I did that. So we killed it in this PR, which you can click on if you like seeing lots of lines deleted. And we replaced it with this, so a more like Markdown-centric pipeline, because really what we're doing is transforming Markdown to React code that we can then manipulate or pass around however we want to make pretty examples. So this is what it looks like now, and it allows us to add or take away things from the design and things from our content writers. So like if we want to support auto-link URLs, we can easily do that, and we do. So if we want to support example captions, well, cool, we can add a transformer, and we did. So we control everything about how the Markdown is rendered now. Yeah, so this is just some examples of how we can benefit from controlling it more when we couldn't before. And one of the ways I think that's big is that we can group by ID and section, and then parse however we want from there. And also we can show pretty errors so that when people break things, like our content writers put BR without a closing tag, which always happens, they can see that they did that, and it's a very clear error message instead of a cryptic one like it was before. So we did this using unified.js. That pipeline that you saw back there was using unified, and we can create indexes now that have like some metadata that we can include on all pages so that all pages know about the routes and the table of contents. So we can show you like a table of contents before your page fully loads, and we can also code split. You can see that import statement will let us code split. So you only get the parts of the page that you need. You don't get your 300 kilobytes of handlebars every page load. And it also allows us to do the GitHub link pretty easy, since we get to see exactly where the file comes from, and then we can link that back to a repo. And it also allowed us to do something we wanted in the design later on, which is we always want to have a design guidelines tab. So this is a pretty code split bundle. So you can see pages like our icon design guidelines. You only download all the icons on that page. So it's no longer downloaded on every page. And this improves our first page load times a ton. So if you're on mobile and 3G, it should be possible to load our page within 30 seconds instead of like a minute. So that's very good. All right, so for the table of contents, this was a miracle story. It came together in a day. Like Rachel designed it, Coker wrote some HTML for it in CSS, and then I implemented it in React and added code to Spy to do the scroll Spy part in a day. And then later we had to fix it because images don't have fixed heights when they load. So we made them have fixed heights, because recomputing the position of H2s and H3s on each on-scroll event is expensive. And so setting out, a whole big reason I do this is I manage the CI and infrastructure for PatternFly, and this was the slowest part of the pipeline by far, and this was holding up the most jobs and causing the most clogging, biggest bottleneck. So we still need 2 Webpack builds, and that's a big reason why Gatsby was slow, is because it has to build twice. It has to build once for a server-side bundle so it can pre-render, and it has to build again for the client-side bundle that it actually ships to you. And it also pre-rendered every single page, which we don't need it to pre-render our full-screen example pages, and also our index page. So when you go to like components select, for example, is the exact same as components select React for now. So you can cache that and save a lot. But we got our build times way down, which I'm super thankful for. So we've saved like 3.5 minutes for every React job. So that's how much faster you'll get your status checks. Same for org and core, even about 50%, 1.5 minutes. And to port this downstream, which it's been ported downstream, like Michael Coker mentioned. So it's port 8001 for core and 8002 for React. I wrapped it in a CLI, so we just run Webpack ourselves. And that allowed it to hook easier into the existing build tools we use in core and React. Whereas before we were kind of doing this hacky thing and you wouldn't see great console output, like on which port to go look at when it started. Now that's all fixed. So that's the org update. Go check it out if you haven't already, patternfly.org.
Exciting stuff. All right, we finished right on time. Good job, everybody. I will send out the recording of this meeting after it's posted to our YouTube channel, and I'll send out a PDF of all the slides for anyone who wants access to the links or contact information going forward. Feel free to share that with your teams or anyone else who is interested, and we'll see you at the end of October with the next update. Thanks, everyone.
Great work.
Thanks. Bye.